everybody. Thank you for coming.
You've got feedback.
That did not work very well.
Wonder. Can you guys do you still hear the feedback?
I'm sorry, what?
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
no feedback, right?
Yeah, I don't hear any feedback now.
Sorry. Classic blunder with the online events. Anyways, sorry about that, but thank you all so much for coming tonight.
Actually, there
Pretty
is
much
feedback.
the ways of normal. That's right.
There shouldn't be feedback with the headphones in.
Now that there still is.
Yeah. Now, Chris, you've got a very weird echo now.
Yes.
Our tiles are switching.
Okay.
It might be one of on your end. Maybe both of you need to wear headphones as well. That could be it.
Wow, I don't have any headphones.
I don't hear any feedback now. No.
I do now.
Right. Let's see. If one of you if you have some headphones, then that would be best. Or I can get you guys going. Do you have feedback in between the two of you?
Well,
No.
let's see.
Yeah, I do.
Oh.
Yeah, Chris Suit is echoing when he talks. So.
Kris Lackey, you're not. Boy, I am.
Let's
This is supernatural.
Yeah. Let's have Chris. Do you have Kris Suit? Do you have some headphones?
I can go look for some. I'll be back. Kris,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Okay. Can I go ahead without feedback or not?
Yeah, you're
I don't
good.
hear
I
anything.
think the two of us are good. No.
No, here's this feedback. Wow, that's bad. Let me try this.
Sorry, everyone. It's been a year of this, but
Yeah, I
why
don't
not
have any
have
headphones
more?
that will work with this. Oh, let me go ahead and start.
Yeah, so I would love to introduce you
Okay.
if the
go ahead.
echo's not too bad.
I don't hear any now.
Okay. So thank you, everybody, and I'm sorry for the technical issues with the feedback and everything, but we're on it. We're going to figure it out. It's my honor to introduce Kris Lackey and Kris Suit for Butcher Pin Road. I'm excited for both of you to be here. I'm afraid I'm going to be echoing. But Kris Lackey is the author of the USA Today bestseller Nails Crossing and has published...
Yeah, this is submarine sound effects. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll get through this. We had no feedback amongst each other earlier.
Yeah, it's just when you let everybody else
Yeah. How's that going? Are we good?
Can you hear them?
Sort of.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us, Chris?
Everything's
I
good?
can hear you. There's feedback, but I can hear you.
Okay.
Speaker
All right.
level here. If you want it louder.
I don't. Ooh,
Okay.
there. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Good.
Everything's good?
Chris, hi.
Hi, Sally.
Kelly, this is my wife, Sally. She's helping me here.
Hi. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay. So back onto the intro. As long as there's no, I think we're good now. So Kris Lackey is the author of the USA Today bestseller Nails Crossing and has published stories in the Missouri Review, Wisconsin Review, CIMARRON Review, and other magazines. Kris Suit worked 17 years as a retail bookseller at the University of Texas and nearly 30 years as a college textbook publisher. I am really excited to have everyone here tonight to celebrate Butcher Pin Road, which has been praised as an impeccably written tale laced with humor and featuring unorthodox, believable detectives by Kirkus Reviews. And before we just kick off to everything, I want to give everyone a very quick rundown of how Crowdcast works, just in case this is your very first time. To the right-hand side is our chat section. You can talk amongst yourselves here, but be sure to save any questions for the Ask a Question box right here. Kris will ask about, open things up to the Q&A for the audience about 30 minutes into the event. And finally, make sure to check out the blue purchase books here. Remember, we're doing signed book plates for Butcher Pin Road. And I believe that's it. Now, with all of that, I'll pass it on to the two of you, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thanks to Mysterious Galaxy for hosting the event, and thanks to my co-reader and friend Kris Suit and Norman. As he said, my crime novel was Butcher Pin Road. I think the genre is generally called rural noir, kind of dark, kind of gothic, definitely rural. Seems to fit. It's the third book in the Bill Maytubby and Hannah Bond series. First is a little bit of geography. The setting is South Central Oklahoma. It's on the rock prairie, which means it's generally not cultivated. It's pebbly. There are big granite boulders, kind of scrubby oaks, and it's kind of spooky at night. It doesn't kind of fit the Western Oklahoma picture of wheat and corn and things like that. The book is set in the Chickasaw Nation. The Chickasaw Nation occupies now 13 counties in south central Oklahoma. The boundaries of the Chickasaw Nation were set when the Chickasaw tribe was removed by the federal government to the west. And after, in the late 19th century, this land was portioned off into allotments and no longer shared in common by the Chickasaw Nation. A little bit more about that later. About 2% of the Chickasaw land remains in the Chickasaw Nation. So, in other words, in the Chickasaw Nation of 13 counties in south central Oklahoma, about 2% of that land belongs to the Chickasaw tribe. It's tribal land. And the Chickasaw Light Horse Police, to which one of my detectives belongs, is partially responsible for law enforcement on Indian land. The Chickasaw Tribal Police, which are headquartered in Ada, which is the modern capital of the Chickasaw Nation, they are called the Light Horse Police as opposed to the cavalry. This is a very old term, and it survives, I think, in all of the major tribal law enforcement entities in the state of Oklahoma. They have jurisdiction on tribal land, as I say. They are commissioned officers, and they are co-deputized by most other law enforcement entities in Oklahoma. So they can move back and forth between most counties and cities and also Indian land. That saves me a lot of problems sometimes. And yes, there are lots of disputes about jurisdiction on tribal land when the state has jurisdiction, the federal government, and when the tribes have jurisdiction. And just a full disclosure, I'm non-native Oklahoman. Okay, let's have a look at our detectives, our two detectives. They're an odd couple, right? They're Bill Maytubby's a Chickasaw Light Horse policeman, as I said. He's half Chickasaw. He has a classical education from St. John's in Santa Fe. St. John's has two branches. He went to the one in Santa Fe. He knows French. He knows ancient Greek, much to the amusement of his friends in South Central Oklahoma. But he does not know Chickasaw. This is kind of embarrassing to him, especially with some of his friends who do speak more Chickasaw than he does. He's learning Chickasaw from Rosetta Stone to supplement what he learned from his elders. And I'm learning Chickasaw from Rosetta Stone too, but very slowly. The last thing about Bill Maytubby, he flies a small old Cessna. He learned to fly when he was in college. And he flies an old Cessna because that's the plane that I learned to fly, and I don't know anything about modern planes, and I haven't flown in a long time. So it's just it's a matter of practical knowledge for me. Bill Maytubby's partner is Hannah Bond. She's a county deputy in Johnston County, which sits in the middle of the Chickasaw Nation, and its county seat, Tishomingo, was the old capital of the Chickasaw Nation long ago. She and Maytubby went to the State Police Academy at the same time. That's where they met each other. She graduated first. He graduated second. She is very tall, very blunt-spoken person. She's a country person. She knows more Chickasaw than Maytubby because she goes to night school, and not because, to this point anyway, she has any connection, any blood connection to the Chickasaws. Bond is a very common Chickasaw name, so it's very possible in the future that she will find out something interesting about her past. She had very bad childhood, Hannah did. She had lots of foster parents. Some of them were good. Some of them were very bad. One of her foster fathers raped and murdered her little sister, so she gives no quarter to violent men. The third principal character in the book is Jill Melton. She is Maytubby's fiance. Like Maytubby, she is an Oklahoman, and like Maytubby, she went away to school. In her case, she went to NYU and lived in Brooklyn, where she met some hipster types that Maytubby gives her lots of trouble about. She is descended from, what she does in her profession is she works for the Chickasaw Nation as a nutrition expert and goes to public schools to teach children about healthy eating and to prevent diabetes in adulthood. She's descended from Chickasaws, and she's also descended from the freed people of the Chickasaws. I think a lot of people don't know that the 5 so-called civilized tribes, when they were removed from the southeastern United States to Indian Territory, all brought with them African slaves. And in the case of the Chickasaws, they chose to fight with the Confederacy in the Civil War. And after the Civil War, the federal government forced the Chickasaws to free all their slaves. All the slaves of all the tribes were freed after the Civil War. The Chickasaw Nation never adopted its freed people, never adopted the slaves or their offspring. And Jill, of course, has many mixed feelings about this. She doesn't like that fact, of course. Jill's very dark-skinned, and she faces a lot of bigotry in her profession. Not a lot, especially not from the children and not from their teachers, but sometimes from the community. She's the object of some really nasty racial slurs from time to time. But she and Maytubby and Bond too, they keep up a pretty good banter all the time. They're comfortable with each other. Sometimes Bond will complete Maytubby. Bond and Maytubby will complete each other's sentences. Uh, I like to keep the conversations percolating as much as I possibly can. So, Kris, sorry to keep you waiting. Like, what's your take on these characters? What do you have any? You have any thoughts on them? I assume you do.
No worries,
What?
Kris. Yes, I certainly do have. And in thinking about Maytubby particularly, I've always been fascinated that he is, as you said, half Chickasaw, and he's proud of that. He's, as you say, embarrassed that he doesn't speak Chickasaw, but he makes a real effort to keep one foot in the white community, so to speak. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but in other words, he lives in Ada, the largest town in the southeastern, south central Oklahoma territory that you write about. Not particularly a large town, but he and Jill live in a very middle class, mostly white neighborhood, and he makes a real effort to fit in that community. And I think his, as I say, sort of having a foot in each culture makes him a very interesting character. That's about all my reflection on your characters for the moment.
Oh, thanks. Oh, I will move along to the plot. We can't do without the plot.
Good.
So we're out on the Big Rock Prairie, as I said, southern Oklahoma, big granite boulders, blackjack oaks, kind of gothic, like I said, especially at night. There is a deaf Chickasaw boy. His name is Jason. He's in the woods at night, and he's found a body floating in a creek. And worse than that, he saw the person who put it there, who put the body there, and even worse than that, that person saw him. So the creek is on old Chickasaw allotment. It's on Indian land. It has never been sold out. It's never been not Indian land. It's from generation to generation been passed down to its owners. Maytubby's a tribal cop, so this is his bailiwick. He teams up with the county deputy Bond, Hannah Bond, and they protect the boy. They protect Jason while they track down the killer. This is rural law enforcement, and some readers sometimes have a little difficulty keeping up with the driving. Well, because it's mostly driving, just like Tony Hillerman's novel. People have to drive 2 hours between towns. It's not that bad. It's not the Navajo res, but there's lots of driving in these books, and lots of kind of sneaking up through the woods in these books, because you can't go up to somebody's apartment and knock on the door after you've walked down the sidewalk. So Maytubby and Bond pound the dark country roads, and they wade through the underbrush. Maytubby's a private pilot, so he teams up with he flies the old Cessna to tail one of the suspects, and gets shot at while he's doing that. The big picture, the through line, is that they uncover a Medicaid fraud ring in an affluent Dallas suburb. The kingpin of this drug ring, I'm sorry, kind of anticlimactic, is a podiatrist. And both Maytubby and his chief are stunned to find out that the podiatrist is a Chickasaw citizen. That's one, and it helps this person to make connections in the Chickasaw Nation. When one of the state police officers is surprised by this, that a Chickasaw should be an affluent podiatrist in an affluent suburb of Dallas, Maytubby points out, well, our U.S. representative from this district in Oklahoma is a Chickasaw. We have a Chickasaw astronaut, and then the state cop he has to back down after that. Well, anyway, the podiatrist is not very sexy, and his profession is in, and his front is a clinic, which is called Foot Kingdom. Even less sexy. But I will tell you that the building has a portcullis, so it might appeal to the more like gothic romantic, like bones in your body. I don't know. Well, anyway, that's the through line. That's the through line of the story. But I really love the rogues along the way. There's this giant bearded mosaic fellow, as in Moses, not a person made of little bitty stones. He's a mosaic fellow. His name is Eliphaz Valentine. And of course, he's known as Tiny. Those people always are, those giant people. He quarries granite, and his object in quarrying granite, he does it on his own, is to build a replica of the holy city, which is in turn a replica of ancient Jerusalem. The holy city is a 100-year-old tourist attraction in Oklahoma, in which every Easter the Passion Play is enacted. And Tiny hopes to replicate this set down in southeastern Oklahoma and get some of his own tourist traffic.
Yeah, Chris.
Of course, Tiny.
Let's make sure people know that the holy city in southwestern Oklahoma is an actual place. I mean, you didn't just make that up. What you made up is his replication of the holy city in southeastern Oklahoma.
Right. That's right. And that tourist attraction is still alive down in the Wichita Mountains, but it's on its last legs. Thank you. That's a good clarification. Tiny, of course, is on disability. That makes him exactly the right person to be quarrying granite and pushing around big granite blocks to make ancient, Roman buildings. But this is part of the Medicaid scam that's going on down there. There's another character who's a toothless alcoholic fellow, kind of scary, chews a lot of tobacco, scares people to death, but he's just a game poacher. He's not, well, I won't give away that part of it. But in any case, the young boy is trapping raccoons, and he's processing the pelts and selling them to this character in the nighttime. It's still done. I was surprised to find out. But my favorite of the rogues in this book is a new character. His name is Leroy Sickles. He is loosely based on, don't tell anybody, but a character who's long dead. A fellow I worked with when I was about 14. I worked at a cemetery, and this was an old man who worked there. He was very smart. He was bald and cranky, and he walked like a marionette, with his hands bouncing up in the air like this all the time, and his legs bouncing up, his knees bouncing up in the air. And his favorite solution to all mechanical problems in the cemetery where I worked was the big hammer. And he would constantly, after he got frustrated trying to fix a piece of equipment, would say, "Bring me that goddamn big hammer." And he would take the big hammer to that. Anyway, in this case, the big hammer is replaced by a 10-gauge shotgun, a giant shotgun that Leroy Sickles has. And he puts it to good use in this story. At one point, he holds off Maytubby's kidnappers. And I hope I will find him amusing. He's also very funny. Well, I will say that this book is character-driven for the most part. Of course, it's a mystery, so the genre demands adherence to certain plot things. You have to have suspects that are, that misleading, and you have to have this and that clues and things like that. But I would say that it's basically character-driven, but has a funny bone, and I like to make sure that there's at least some humor in most of the scenes when it can be allowed. Sometimes the gravity of the situation, the death of a friend, or or in the case of the next novel, I'm writing the death of the central character. It's impossible to have accommodate both of those things at the same time, so that you can't just have, levity and banner, and then the next minute everybody's somber and sad, and it doesn't work that way. So it's kind of hard. Jill
Chris,
Melton matches.
let me interrupt again and say this just occurred to me, but as a mystery fan, and someone tells me about an author who's written a series of mysteries, the first thing I always ask is, are these mysteries sequential? So you need to read them in order of publication, or can you just read them at random? And that's
the answer is both. You can read them all individually. I try to provide enough context in each one so that they stand alone. But events that happened in earlier novels are referred to in later novels. So it is a sequence, but the sequence is not important. Sometimes there are little inside jokes, whereas if you know things that have happened in the first book. For example, in the second book, Jill Melton shoots an intruder into her apartment who's trying to kill her, and she shoots him in the leg with her own Friedman shotgun. Her great-grandfather, the Friedman, and some of the pellets go into her dining room table. And later scenes in her dining room table, there are jokes made about the pellets in the dining room table. Jill also plays the banjo, and her banjo gets shot all to hell in that scene. So Maytubby has to buy her a new banjo in the next book. So
just to reiterate, it's not essential that you read the mysteries in order, but it's probably helpful.
It might be helpful, but I don't think you would miss anything.
No.
You would miss anything, yeah. I like to write really lean prose. I like to pare away lots of adjectives and pare away lots of verbals and things that, to me, clog up the sentences. I don't have lots of description. What one person said is that some mystery authors take 1,000 words to tie a shoelace, and I don't like to do that. I think readers can generally parse things out with long explanations, but I do try to conventionally, pretty much at the end of the book, tie up all the loose ends, so that everything's explained at the end and try to make that part interesting without having it just be a rote accounting for every event that happened in the book. So I let the dialogue and the action do the heavy lifting for the most part. And I think the readers can do without a whole lot of meddling. Chris, whatever. Do you have that's kind of my shtick on the book. Do you have further observations about?
Yeah, I have a few questions. And just to reiterate, you talked about at the top, the geography and the fact that your characters do a lot of driving around. And I suppose some readers might find that irritating. I happen to find it fascinating because I like geography, and I know generally the countryside you're talking about. But I find that to be a real strength of your mysteries, and so I hope people enjoy that. Let me ask you. I know you're originally from Central Oklahoma, and you were educated elsewhere and worked elsewhere. But let me ask you, how were you drawn to Southeastern Oklahoma and the Chickasaws?
Well, I like to travel down there. I like to fish in the Blue River, which is in many of these books. It's a clear stream, which is unusual in Oklahoma, except for the southeastern part of the state. And in the wintertime, it's stocked with trout, which figures into the plot of Butcher Pin Road. because other streams are not. And I had relatives, my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law both lived in Ada, and she worked for the Chickasaw Nation as a nutritionist and introduced me to her friends who did that and took me around to some of the test kitchens and and introduced me to some of the educational overtures that the tribe makes in well, they do it all over the eastern part of the state. And then one day when I was learning all these things, and of course reading about Chickasaws when I had moved back to the state, I saw a light horse police cruiser on the street right before I got in my car. And I thought, well, that is absolutely the coolest name for a law enforcement agency in the whole United States. So I mean, it's as good as the Mounties. And so then Maytubby's character came to life from that. And then he needed a companion with whom to talk and to bounce things off of. And so Anna came out of that. I did some research in the tribal roles of the Chickasaws so I could come up with the right name for Maytubby. The Tubby name sounds odd to Western ears because of the Teletubbies, which is a cartoon character that makes it sound silly. But in Chickasaw names, the Tubbe or Tubby or Tibbe, it was a suffix added to a name indicate that a young man usually had done something brave, had done something brave in battle, maybe killed somebody, and then that name is added on to the characteristics of the person. So it's added on as a suffix to the name. There is a character in Faulkner. Faulkner's novels are set in Mississippi, and the first humans who appear in those books are Chickasaws before they're removed. And there's a character named Ikamatubby in some of those novels, and so he's got the same name. But that's kind of how I got my start with those things, and then I began to build. I went and interviewed the chief of the Chickasaw Light Horse Police in Ada, and he told me about all the jurisdictional knots, which are now much more complicated because of the McGirt decision, which came down from the Supreme Court only a few months ago. So now everybody's in a tailspin over who's in charge of criminal investigations and prosecutions in Indian country, because the McGirt decision said the Indian nations were never disestablished, and everybody has been going along assuming for 100 years that they were. So we'll see what happens with that. That's a long answer to a short question. I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay. And your reference to the McGirt decision, we definitely don't have time to go into the details of that. It's currently boiling on the front burner in Oklahoma, and
it is
doesn't show any signs of cooling down anytime soon. But I didn't know the origins of the names that end in Tubby. As you say, there are many Chickasaws. That's a very common name. The current governor of the Chickasaw Nation is Bill Anotubby.
Right.
Brilliant governor and businessman. But anyway, that's a common name. So interesting. Well, let me shift away a little bit and ask you, I think people may well be curious about you as a writer. What's your sort of your procedure, your schedule? How much do you write per day, or where do you like to write? I mean, I'm curious about that.
Well, I'm a restless person, and my attention span is about 50 minutes for something this intense, and so I do it in 2 batches a day. Usually one about noon, and then one late in the afternoon. Right before the pandemic, I always wrote in coffee shops, and during the pandemic, when I had to stay at home, I put coffee shop YouTubes on my computer so I could hear all the white noise in the background because I can't work at home in silence. It's too boring. It's too distracting. So I'm the opposite of other people, and I keep a little plot book, which is a little tiny notebook about that big, and I write down the time of day and the page number and all the main events in that, and that's how I keep it structured. I do not plan out the whole novel in advance. I know J.K. Rowling and people like that. They plan every single scene just like a movie director, so that everything is fixed except for the details. And I'm the other way around. I work with my detectives, and they lead me to the events. This is the first novel, the third one, where I generally knew who committed the crime. And so I had a little bit more of a sense of structure, but I did not know the murderer. So that was a surprise to me as well. The murderer came back from an earlier part in the book. I was surprised to see, not that there's any other parallel, but Stephen King recently wrote a crime novel, which he doesn't usually do. But he said, yeah, he had no idea who committed the crime. He just followed the events and followed the detectives to see what was going to happen. And that can have disastrous plot difficulties. Sometimes you find yourself at a really, you get yourself into a muddle and you have to get yourself out. So there is that.
Yeah, you mentioned that you like to write in coffee shops, and that you told me recently that you take advantage of the baristas because they're young people.
Well, I don't take advantage of the bars.
Well, maybe
I understand.
maybe
I know what you.
I misstated. By that, I mean
I take advantage of
their age and familiarity with language and so
right. That's right. Yeah, yes, I take advantage of them every day. I have to ask them questions all the time, mostly about diction, because I'm old and my characters are about 20 years younger, 25 years younger than I am, and so I can't be using old people language, old people diction. And also lately, what was the most recent thing was about what do you call the meat that you put like in a hot dog? And so we went through all the possibilities: the frankfurter, the wiener, the weenie, all this stuff. And everybody said that's hot dog. So okay, it's hot dog. So it is. And I asked him what things are called. Like what do you call that? And so one barista is an art major, and he said that's the blade of your hand. He knows it. He knows it from figure drawing, and so okay, solves my problem. Okay, we have questions from.
Yeah, let's take questions from people who are listening, tapping in. Now, I might need a little help here with the technology. I think I click ask a question. Kelly, you can jump in here if you need to.
Yeah, go ahead and click that.
Okay, I've clicked
And
that.
You should see a couple questions so far.
Over on the right.
I see a couple of comments. I don't see. Do you see questions?
I don't see questions.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I can ask them too, but down at the bottom it says ask a question at the bottom, and you click that.
Scroll down. Here is a question that says, Kris, what is your favorite scene to write, and what was the scene that surprised you the most, without giving any spoilers away?
The scene that I like to write the most is when Hannah Bond goes to, I don't know, I suppose the person has read the book already, but when Hannah Bond goes to serve a summons to Leroy Sickles, and he comes out on the porch with his shotgun. And that's when we first get to see him dancing like a marionette and cursing and having to put down his shotgun, and then making jokes with Hannah Bond about what she's there for. She asked him if he's Leroy Sickles, and he said, I'm beginning to think that I wouldn't. That I wish that I wouldn't. That's right. So that's my favorite scene. It's my favorite scene to write. I think the most surprising scene to me, Maytubby goes to visit a woman who owns a liquor store in Colgate. Colgate's in the Choctaw Nation, but it's not very far away. And she's been a kind of a spy for him for people going through her town. So he flies over there to ask her some questions. And she's got a thing for him, and she flirts with him pretty heavy in this scene. And I think how embarrassed and aroused that May Tubby was when the scene happened. Both of those things kind of scared me, and so I have to make it work. I can't have him be guilty and go back to his fiance the same night. So, okay, what else we got?
Well, I'm looking for another question. Kelly, are there more than one? Is there more than one question?
There is, and I can ask it if you want, if you don't see it.
I don't see it, so if you would, that would be great.
Sure. All right, this question says, some authors who have written novels from a culture or ethnicity different from theirs have drawn criticism for misrepresentation or misappropriation. What are your thoughts about this question, and how have you approached this possible hazard?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's something that I worried about from the very beginning. I taught literature before. I retired and started writing mystery novels, but it was a topic that came up in literature classes a lot. So one of the ways that I try to avoid that is to kind of take away stereotypical representations and cliches and like bigoted and uninformed attributes of my indigenous characters. I think Maytubby's the main one, but Jill Melton is as well. I stay away completely from ritual, from spiritual things. Those are not, I'm not privy to those things. I don't understand them very well, except for what I read in books, and that's not true. I haven't, unlike Tony Hillerman, who went into great detail about the cultural qualities and ritual of his characters, I stay pretty far back from that. Maytubby, the official religion of Chickasaw Nation is Protestant Christianity, and that's what it says on their website. Bill Maytubby is a secular person, we'll put it that way. And so that I have, I've had 3 indigenous readers in the past. Sometimes all 3 have read a manuscript, and I ask them if they see any cultural problems in the manuscript. And in the manuscript that I'm working on right now, in fact, I got some correction on that. So that's, I think that's my response to the question.
And let me see if I see any other. Here's one. Here's a new one. Okay. This person asked, was there anything particularly challenging in writing this book that you hadn't experienced with other novels?
Something different.
Challenge.
I would say trying to connect a large Medicare, Medicaid fraud ring to relatively small players in southern Oklahoma and make it seem plausible. I have a friend who worked in Medicaid fraud. He was a detective a long time ago, some decades ago. He's a retired law enforcement officer, and he said these things did indeed go on, and that it was common to recruit people from the countryside, unsophisticated people, unsuspecting people, so that they could file excessive claims on their Medicaid and Medicare policies, programs. So I think putting those things together was something of a challenge. We'll let the readers decide if it was successful or not.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate what you said, I know a bit about southeastern Oklahoma, and I actually lived in the very Tony neighborhood of Dallas where your character
Oh yeah, really?
lived and practiced. Yes, I had a very small apartment on the very edge of Highland Park, but
Oh really? I didn't know
having
that.
those two venues in your novel, I can see how that would be challenging.
I like to bounce back and forth between the city slickers and the country folks, and I do it again in the book that I'm working on now. That's a lot of fun to me.
Well, I know you said this earlier, but so much of your book is devoted to the relationship among the three main characters and their dialogue with each other. That's a big part of the book. For example, I'm not sure I know, how did May Tubby and Jill Melton, how did they happen to meet from pretty different backgrounds?
Yeah, I've never, they're both from the tribe and they're both about the same age. And so I've never dealt with it specifically, but they came to work at about the same time for the tribe. He coming as a light horse police officer and she working in, and I haven't brought them together as children, I don't think ever. And maybe I should have maybe they should talk about that sometime at one of their dinners. They're always cooking dinner together. So maybe I should bring that up sometime. It might be sweet.
That's another thing I hadn't even thought about, but his, or rather your descriptions of the contrasts in their diets. Hannah Bond just apparently has just an awful dietary practices and just the worst you can think of. And then Maytubby he seems to be a vegetarian. I guess he's not actually, but the differences in their diets, their cooking are very interesting.
Yeah, they're good foils for each other because she has lots of pizza and many hamburgers at one setting and pork and stuff. She's still very fit. She runs fast. She's very strong, but she's a big person with big appetites. And Maytubby's kind of an ascetic, and his girlfriend, his fiance is a nutritionist, so they eat pretty healthy. But here's a spoiler in the book that I'm writing now, they eat meat together, but it's venison, but they do eat meat. And there is some comic seeds when Hannah Bond has to give Maytubby's brought along, I don't know, nuts and berries and cranberries and raisins and crap like that. And they get in a situation where he has to have lots of strength and perseverance, and she gives him a bunch of beef jerky. So takes care of that. She lords it over him all the time. She reminds him of that all the time. She brings it along in case he's going to need some more beef jerky. Yeah.
Okay, here's a brief question. Was anything from Butcher Pen Road inspired by real life events?
Well, as I said earlier, Leroy Sickles comes from a character that I knew a long time ago. And also, when I was young, I was a pilot, and I was a private pilot, and I lost my license because I got migraines. But I learned to fly, and so I can. Maytubby can fly. He does not fly the tribal airplanes, and the tribe has airplanes. They even have jets, I think. But he rents his own airplane in case he screws up. He doesn't want to be responsible for it. But he has to fly an old plane because that's the only plane I learned to fly in. And I don't know modern avionics. I couldn't fly a modern plane unless somebody gave me lessons. So. Yeah,
I'm looking at the cover of the new book, and yes, there is a plane in the distance. Looks like a single engine.
It is a Cessna. In the first novel, the jacket designer was really good, but she put a generic airplane on there, and I caught some grief because it was the wrong kind of airplane. This is the right kind of airplane.
Okay. And was there an airplane on the cover of the second book?
No, he didn't fly.
Okay.
And then some readers got very upset by that because he didn't fly in that one.
Let's see.
Now, this one, I don't know. Remains to be seen.
Hey, Kitty.
Well, good. There are a couple more questions here. Can you talk more about the research on your deaf character?
Yes, I would be happy to do that. I had no idea. I was very naive about this character. I envisioned him when I wrote the first scene. The young boy, about 12, 13, he's coming up to open up the ranch gate. And for some reason, I just imagined him as being deaf, and I don't know why. It surprised me. So then I very stupidly thought, I'll just use YouTube, and I'll translate everything that he needs to say. His mother knows sign language, and she can read lips, even though she's a hearing person. And he goes to the Oklahoma School for the Deaf, which is very close to his house. He lives at home and goes to that school. And I will just translate things. Well, that was stupid. And I started talking to former students who are ASL practitioners and teachers who introduced me to their deaf friends. And then I have a friend here in Norman who is a translator and who's actually done law enforcement translations with deaf citizens. And so I had all those people read, or at least go through scenes with me. Two of those people read all of my deaf character scenes and corrected them. And there were heavy corrections and really important things about the way his mother would respond and the way that Jason would respond to these other characters. So I hope that I did an okay job with that, but I'm not going to take on something like that again. That was a tall order.
This might be the last question no, there's a couple more. Okay, this person asks, I enjoyed Sickles. Will he be in your next book?
He is in the next book. I like him as well. And I have to be careful not to let him take over things. And I have to see if he and Hannah are going to get some fire going. I don't know. I think it's a possibility. But I like Leroy. He doesn't. He comes in handy, but you have to use him sparingly because he's a large character with a large gun, and things can go wrong. So I'm glad you liked him.
Yeah, here's one more question. Do you read any local newspapers from towns in the Chickasaw Nation that give you ideas for crimes or plot points?
I sometimes, let's see, I'm trying to think which book. In the second book, I got a crime from the Chickasaw Times. There was a guy in the casinos who was cutting holes in the bottoms of cash and coin bags, so that when the guards carried them to be counted, the coins and the dollar bills would fall out onto the ground, and he would go and pick them up and steal them. Of course, it was a stupid idea, but and he got caught immediately because there were 10,000 cameras all over the casino counting rooms. And I also had to have a friend who worked in the casinos and security, and he explained to me how the money is counted and how the security works and how the trade-offs are, how the handoffs are made to the armored cars at the casino. So that was a big help. I don't read the Chickasaw Times regularly. I read the Ada News sometimes, and the big tribal crimes are often reported in the Oklahoman, which I do read every day, and sometimes in the Norman transcript. But I don't read the Chickasaw Times every day, no.
Well, it occurred to me when you were talking about the Chickasaws, people who don't know might find it interesting. Of the 5 civilized tribes that those of us in Oklahoma have grown up with and grown up with that history, currently the Chickasaws, I think I'm safe in saying that they are the most successful economically in terms of successful development. The governor, Bill Anatoby, whom I mentioned previously, is absolutely brilliant. And but the Chickasaws are very interesting. And in our local Norman paper, Norman is a town of, I don't know, 80 or 100,000 people, almost a suburb of Oklahoma City, and the location of the University of Oklahoma. And in our local paper, which is a daily, once a week, the Chickasaws pay for a page.
The whole page.
A small paper is a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And so they're an interesting tribe.
In 4 colors.
They-
It's in 4 colors.
They have lots of. People know them primarily for the casinos as a way of making money, but they have steel industries, and they have IT industries. They have health. They have huge health services all over the place. They build nursing homes, and they help non-tribal public school systems all over South Central Oklahoma. So yes, it's a thriving enterprise.
Well, I think that's the last question I see on the screen here. Kelly, do you want to wrap up?
Thanks, Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you both so much for being here tonight, and thank you to everyone who attended. Just one quick reminder, please purchase your copy of Butcher Pen Road at Mysterious Galaxy, and you will receive a signed bookplate by the author. And I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. I hope you all have a wonderful night, and thank you so much.
Kelly, thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Chris.